What if the most feared demon was never meant to be a demon at all? Picture the horned figure seated in darkness, wings stretched, a torch of fire blazing between its horns. One hand points upward, the other downward, inscribed with the ancient axiom, as above, so below. A serpent coils across the belly, breasts soften the chest. A goat's head gazes forward, with eyes that see beyond judgment. This is Baphomet condemned as Satan, whispered in the accusations against the Knights Templar, vilified by church and empire. Yet to occultists, mystics, and seekers of forbidden knowledge, Baphomet was never the enemy. Baphomet is the symbol of balance, the archetype of paradox, the union of opposites hidden within every soul. The church called it abomination. Eliphas Levi drew it in the 19th century as the sabbatical goat, a visual riddle of alchemy, male and female, angel and beast, light and shadow. Those who gaze upon the figure are unsettled, not because it is monstrous, but because it refuses to choose. It embodies both, and in its refusal, it reveals forbidden truth. Like Abraxas before it, Baphomet teaches that wholeness comes not by denying darkness, but by embracing paradox, holding fire and water, heaven and earth, within a single form. What if this image, feared as the devil, was instead the mirror of ourselves, our hidden wholeness, our unspoken contradictions? What if Baphomet was never Satan's throne, but humanity's most terrifying revelation, that we are not one thing, but many, not pure light nor pure shadow, but both entwined? To understand Baphomet, we must first step into the labyrinth of accusations, distortions, and architectures of fear that birthed its infamous reputation. The figure that now sits enthroned in occult imagination did not begin as a demon carved from stone, but as a whisper in the corridors of power, a shadow wielded as weapon. The architecture of evil surrounding Baphomet was not a single act of vilification, but centuries of deliberate construction-ish layer of slander. Ritual and suppression stacked upon the next until a paradox became a monster. The first stones were laid during the trials of the Knights Templar in the early 14th century. Under torture and inquisitorial pressure, confessions spilled that the Templars worshipped a strange idol called Baphomet. The descriptions varied wildly. Some claimed it was a severed head, others a goat, others an androgynous figure of power. No artifact was ever truly found, but the accusation alone was enough. The Templars, once guardians of the Holy Land and treasures of Christendom, were dismantled, their leaders burned, their order destroyed. The idol called Baphomet became legal fiction, a phantom conjured to justify annihilation. The architecture of evil had found its cornerstone, demonized the enemy with an image so terrible that its mere name chills the faithful. Centuries later, French occultist Eliphas Levi resurrected the phantom with his famous 1856 engraving, Sabbatical Goat. Here the image took form: seated figure with wings, goat's head, breasts, torch of illumination, hands gesturing heaven and earth. Levi did not present Baphomet as a devil to be feared, but as a symbol of the absolute, the reconciliation of opposites. Yet even this symbolic reinterpretation was quickly absorbed into the architecture of fear. Popular imagination fused Levi's drawing with Satan, branding it as ultimate blasphemy. By the time of 20th century occult revivals, Baphomet had become both demon of Christian nightmares and sacred icon of forbidden seekers. The architecture of evil lies in this duality. Empire and church required an enemy and idol to symbolize heresy, inversion, corruption. In Baphomet, they found a perfect vessel, strange enough to unsettle, paradoxical enough to threaten order, empty enough to be filled with accusation. What makes Baphomet powerful is precisely what made it dangerous to empire. It resists categorization. Male and female, human and beast, angel and monster, it refuses the binaries on which orthodoxy depends. And so the architecture of suppression declared it evil, for to embrace paradox is to dissolve walls of dogma. But the architecture of evil is not confined to history. The image of Baphomet was revived in modernity. Placed on the cover of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, adopted as emblem of Satanic Temple, etched into tattoos and graffiti, each time its form unsettled, drawing outrage, protest, fear. Political groups denounce it, churches rail against it, communities burn effigies, the architecture renews itself, an eternal cycle of fear, accusation, denial. Yet beneath the hysteria lies a deeper architecture, the recognition that Baphomet is not monster, but mirror. Its image reflects our suppressed contradictions, the halves we deny, the dualities we exile. To look upon Baphomet is to confront self not as unitary being, but as paradoxical whole. What empire called evil, mystics saw as sacred. In Baphomet's torch burns the light of knowledge illumination that pierces darkness of ignorance. In its breasts lies a symbol of nurture, balancing masculine force with feminine receptivity. In its goat head burns instinct, raw life force, nature untamed by dogma. In its serpent coiled about the belly lies symbol of kundalini, life energy rising through body. Each element is charged, symbolic, alchemical. Yet empires strip these meanings, fusing them into caricature of Satan, rendering symbol into weapon of fear. This too is architecture of evil, reduction of complexity into condemnation, transformation of paradox into blasphemy. The architecture extends into culture. From medieval woodcuts of witches riding goats to modern horror films, the goat has become shorthand for evil. Ritual accusations of goat-headed idols echo across centuries. Children are taught to fear horns, hooves, wings. The architecture is pedagogy. Teach the masses to shudder at Baphomet's form, and they will never ask what it means. But the forbidden truth persists that the very elements demonized are the elements needed for wholeness. This architecture of evil is thus double-edged. On one side, it demonizes Baphomet, branding it devil. On the other, it preserves its image in collective memory. By condemning it, empire ensured its survival. By burning effigies, they carved its form deeper into imagination. By declaring it forbidden, they consecrated its power. Every suppression strengthens paradox. Baphomet thrives on inversion, rejected by authority, embraced by seekers, feared by masses, studied by occultists. Its very condemnation feeds its myth. And so, the architecture of evil that tried to bury Baphomet instead built its throne. Accusation became scripture, fear became fuel, distortion became durability. In a world of binaries, the paradox endures. The more empire demands purity, the more Baphomet reveals complexity. The more churches shout Satan, the more seekers whisper symbol. The architecture of suppression becomes architecture of survival. The forbidden truth of part 2 is this: Baphomet's evil lies not in itself, but in the architecture built around it. It was shaped into demon by fear, yet drawn as paradox by mystics. It is monster to empire, mirror to the awakened. To study its architecture is to see that evil is not inherent, but constructed built stone by those who fear paradox. To dismantle this architecture is to glimpse Baphomet anew, not as devil in darkness, but as symbol of balance, forbidden because it dissolves boundaries empire depends upon. If Baphomet is more than a demon, then its true power lies not in fear but in symbol. Every line of Eliphas Levi's illustration, every horn and feather, every torch and serpent is language. A grammar of paradox that speaks to those willing to read beyond empire's distortions. The language of symbols in Baphomet is not random ornament, it is deliberate. A visual scripture encoding truths too dangerous to canonize. To gaze upon this figure is to enter a cathedral of symbols, where each detail becomes doorway to forbidden knowledge. The goat's head, most infamous of all, is symbol of instinct, of earthbound vitality, of nature untamed. In Christian polemic, it was demonized as Satan's visage, the scapegoat of sin. Yet in older traditions, goats signified fertility, resilience, raw power of life. Dionysus crowned with goat horns embodied ecstasy. Pan with his cloven hooves represented primal freedom. Baphomet inherits this lineage horns, not as mark of evil, but of vitality demonized by cultures afraid of their own wildness. The goat's head is symbol of what society represses: instinct, sexuality, life force. To call it monstrous is to confess fear of what dwells within. Above the head burns the torch, flame between horns. This is not fire of damnation, but fire of illumination. The torch is knowledge, light of consciousness, Gnosis that pierces ignorance. Its placement crown of fire recalls the Kabbalistic Sephira Keter, the crown of divine emanation, as well as the Enlightenment flame of Eastern traditions. To demonize the torch is to demonize knowledge itself. Here lies the forbidden truth. Empires fear not darkness, but illumination that dissolves control. The torch between horns is a Luciferian symbol of enlightenment, banned by those who thrive on silence. The hands form another scripture. One points upward, the other downward, inscribed with Latin words solve and coagula. Together they articulate hermetic axiom, solve et coagula, to dissolve and to bind. This is alchemical formula of transformation. Break down to purify, recombine to transmute. It is a cycle of destruction and creation, death and rebirth. In Christian demonology, such gestures were read as mockery of priestly benediction, yet in symbolic language, they are instruction. Embrace cycles, reconcile opposites, unite heaven and earth. The hand gestures are symbols of paradox itself. No ascent without descent, no creation without dissolution. The breasts upon chest unsettle those who demand purity of gender. Male yet female Baphomet bears both. This is not accident but deliberate symbol, the reconciliatio, oppositorum, union of opposites. In alchemy, the philosopher's stone emerges from marriage of king and queen. Gnosticism, wholeness arises when masculine and feminine unite. In psychology, Jung saw integration of anima and animus as key to individuation. The breasts of Baphomet are a symbol of this unitine, neither man nor woman, but wholeness beyond categories. Their demonization reveals fear of integration, obsession with binaries empire demands. At the belly coils a serpent entwined around caduceus-like staff. This serpent is symbol of life energy, rising force known as kundalini in Eastern mysticism. It is also emblem of healing, as in staff of Asclepius, and of Gnosis, recalling Eden's serpent who offered knowledge. To empire, serpent is tempter, corrupter, devil. To mystic, serpent is wisdom, energy, awakening. Its place upon Baphomet's belly links sexuality with spirituality, body with spirit. The serpent is symbol of forbidden continuity, flesh and spirit not enemies, but coils of same force. The wings stretch behind, angelic yet demonic. They remind us that Baphomet is not only beast, but angel, not only earth but sky. The wings symbolize transcendence, capacity to rise beyond material. Yet coupled with goat hooves, they remind us, transcendence without grounding is illusion. The wings of Baphomet say, true ascent is embodied, spirit and flesh united. In empire's morality, wings are angelic only when divorced from beast. Baphomet's symbol, they are both onion of heights and depths. Even the seated posture speaks language. Baphomet sits on throne, figure of stability, yet exposed in wilderness. It is enthroned yet exiled, crowned yet condemned. This paradox of posture is symbol of truth rejected, wisdom enthroned within but exiled without. The throne is symbol of sovereignty, the wilderness symbol of banishment. Together they declare, wholeness is sovereign but always exiled by those who fear it. The pentagram often drawn upon Baphomet's forehead amplifies this symbolic lexicon. Upright, it is a symbol of spirit governing matter, human microcosm of divine. Inverted, it became an emblem of Satanism. Yet even inversion is symbolic. Star turned downwards signifies descent of spirit into matter, incarnation, embodiment. To brand it evil is to fear descent, to fear matter. But symbolic language insists incarnation itself is sacred. Pentagram on Baphomet is riddled upright or inverted. Both are true, for paradox is its essence. Taken together, these symbols, weave grammar of forbidden knowledge. Goat for instinct, torch for illumination, breasts for unity, serpent for life force, wings for transcendence, gestures for transformation. Each detail encodes paradox. Baphomet is visual grimoire, book of symbols binding wholeness. Its image is scripture, not written in words, but in forms. To read it is to practice Gnosis, to see unity where empire sees division, to embrace paradox where orthodoxy demands purity. Empire responded by demonizing language itself. The goat became devil, torch became hellfire, serpent became tempter, breasts became obscenity, wings became mockery. Pentagram became curse, each symbol inverted into terror. This is architecture of control. Redefine symbols so masses fear them, ensuring forbidden truth remains buried. Yet paradox resists burial. Each time torch is demonized, flame burns brighter for those who seek. Each time serpent is cursed, wisdom coils deeper. Each time breasts are mocked, unity whispers through shame. The language of symbols survives, speaking across distortions. Modern occultists reclaimed this language. Levi's engraving codified it. Crowley reinterpreted it. Modern Satanic Temple deployed it as satire of dogma. But beyond these movements, Baphomet remains symbol of inner wholeness, language of shadow and light. The true power of its symbols lies not in rituals of others, but in mirror they provide. To study them is to confront paradox within self. Instincts feared, knowledge forbidden, unity denied, wings clipped. Baphomet's symbols speak not of devil outside, but of wholeness within. The forbidden truth of part 3 is this: Baphomet's language is not evil, but grammar of paradox. Its symbols whisper that instinct is holy, knowledge liberates, unity redeems, paradox heals. To demonize them is to fear wholeness. To embrace them is to awaken. The figure feared, as devil, is scripture of balance, book of forbidden symbols written in horns, wings, and flame. To learn its language is to unlearn empire's fear. Blood has always been the price by which humanity negotiates with the divine. In temples and battlefields, in covenants and sacrifices, blood flows as the oldest currencies sustaining power, consecrating ritual, sealing contracts between flesh and spirit. The story of Baphomet, shrouded in accusation and symbol, cannot be told without reckoning with this crimson economy. For whether in the torture chambers of the Templars, the myths of demonic rites, or the allegories hidden in its very form, Baphomet is entangled in blood's economy of exchange, both literal and metaphorical. The earliest mention of Baphomet in the trials of the Knights Templar is soaked in blood. Under duress, brothers confessed to worshipping a strange idol, to spitting upon the cross, to obscene rituals. Some whispered of severed heads, others of goat figures, still others of bloody rites. Historians now know these confessions were coerced, shaped by torture, yet the imagery persisted. To accuse an enemy of drinking blood, of shedding it in ritual, is to mark them beyond redemption. Blood became legal proof of corruption, currency used to purchase their condemnation. The Templars bled in fire, burned at stake, their bodies transformed into sacrifice that reinforced the power of crown and church. Here, blood's economy did not sanctify, but destroy. Later, Baphomet became bound to stories of witchcraft, Sabbaths, and satanic rites. Witches were said to kiss the goat, drink blood, profane sacraments. No proof was needed. Blood was accusation itself. To speak of Baphomet was to invoke specter of hidden blood sacrifices, rituals of inversion. Fear of blood misused became tool of control. The architecture of evil weaves blood into its narrative. For there is no accusation more potent than claim of blood spilled in shadows. But beneath these accusations lies deeper symbolism. In occult traditions, blood represents life force, vitality, essence that binds spirit to body. Alchemists saw blood as red stone, matter infused with spirit. In Kabbalah, blood was nefesh, the soul's vitality. In this symbolic language, Baphomet's associations with blood reveal another truth. It is not about spilled gore, but about exchange of energy, transformation of opposites. Blood is price of transformation. To unite above and below light and darkness, one must pay with life force, with suffering, with sacrifice. The torch burns between horns, but its fire consumes blood. Illumination demands cost. Mary Magdalene's gospel revealed hidden economy of endurance. In Baphomet's symbolism, blood's economy is inverted. Accusations of literal gore obscure deeper truth. Blood is not only spilled in chalices, but in silence. Labor, suffering of those condemned. Templars' blood-fed architecture of fear, but their myth-fed imagination of seekers. Witches' blood burned on stakes, but their stories fed hidden lineages. Blood flows not only on altars, but through memory, through myth, through suppression. Every act of erasure bleeds. Every forbidden symbol pays price in crimson currency. Look closely at Baphomet's image. The serpent coiled at its belly, staff entwined, evokes circulation of energy. This is blood spiritualized, life force rising, energy flowing through body. Its breasts feed with milk, its veins pulse with blood, its torch burns with fiery essence. This is economy of balance. Blood is matter, torch is spirit, serpent is energy. To demonize this figure is to demonize blood itself, to fear life force embodied. The Church, in condemning Baphomet, condemned not only symbol, but vitality, sexuality, energy, all forms of blood that flow beyond control. In mythic sense, blood becomes price of Gnosis. Prometheus shed for fire, Christ for redemption, martyrs for faith. Baphomet too demands blood, not literal gore, but symbolic willingness to bleed contradictions, to suffer paradox, to pay with certainty. To embrace paradox is to bleed identity, to lose safety, to endure exile. Blood here is metaphor for cost of awakening. To learn forbidden knowledge is to bleed illusions. To carry torch between horns is to accept pain of illumination. The demon of balance demands no chalice of gore, but sacrifice of false purity. The architecture of accusations weaponized this truth. By accusing seekers of blood rituals, empire turned symbolic sacrifice into crime. To confess paradox, to embrace wholeness, became equated with drinking blood, inverting sacraments. Blood as metaphor was literalized into terror. Yet this very distortion reveals fear at heart of empire. Fear that people might pay price willingly, lead illusions, embrace forbidden wholeness. By criminalizing blood and ritual, Church sought to sever humanity from its oldest currency of transformation. But the forbidden truth remains: blood is always currency. Every life demands cost. Soldiers bleed for nations, workers bleed for machines, mothers bleed for birth, mystics bleed in silence. Baphomet encodes this truth in form: goat head for instinct, torch for spirit, serpent for energy, breasts for nurture, all bound together by unseen flow of blood. To gaze upon Baphomet is to recognize economy you already live, that every transformation demands sacrifice, every illumination burns blood, every paradox exacts price. Imagine ritual circle. A torch burns, goat-headed figure presides, dancers chant, accusers cry, they spill blood. Perhaps no gore flows, yet blood flows, still in exhaustion, in memory, in exile. The cost is real, though not always literal. This is what Baphomet symbolizes. Blood beyond gore, sacrifice beyond death, price paid in silence, endurance, paradox. It is currency of forbidden knowledge, always demanded, never avoidable. The forbidden truth of Part 4 is this: blood is oldest currency, and Baphomet reveals its deeper economy. Not chalices of gore, but sacrifice of certainty. Not corpses on altar, but paradox embraced. Every illumination bleeds illusions. Every awakening demands price. To accuse Baphomet of blood rites is to misunderstand symbol. To recognize its torch is to see that you already bleed, every day, for powers you do not name. The choice is not whether you bleed, but for what. Every symbol carries within it an unwritten contract, and Baphomet is no exception. To stare into the goat's burning eyes is to feel invitation, a covenant whispered from shadows. If you desire knowledge, if you long for balance, if you would dare to unite what has been torn apart, then you must sign. The figure does not coerce, it does not force, it simply waits, embodying the ancient law of exchange: no gift without cost, no knowledge without price. In the mythos surrounding Baphomet, pacts and contracts form the invisible thread binding accusations, rituals, and seekers alike. The earliest contracts with Baphomet were accusations themselves. When the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping this idol, the implication was clear: they had entered forbidden pact. To kneel before Baphomet meant they had broken covenant with Christ, exchanging loyalty to church for loyalty to demon. The architecture of accusation imagined a contract signed in secret chambers, sealed by kiss, sanctified by blood. Of course, no such idol or pact was ever proven, yet the narrative was powerful enough to justify torture and death. Here, pact functioned as legal fiction, a binding contract written not by Templars, but by inquisitors, condemning them to flames. The myth of their pact with Baphomet sealed their fate. Later, as the figure emerged in occult traditions, Baphomet became an archetype of forbidden contract. In modern grimoires and whispered rituals, to invoke Baphomet was to sign covenant of inversion, rejecting binaries, embracing paradox, daring to seek illumination in darkness. Unlike Faust's bargain with Mephistopheles, this contract was not about gaining wealth or power, but about integration. The seeker who calls upon Baphomet enters pact of balance to accept torment of contradiction. To sacrifice purity for wholeness, to embrace knowledge empire calls blasphemy. This is not contract for advantage, but covenant for transformation. The price is identity, comfort, belonging. The reward is gnosis, balance, awakening. In symbolic terms, Baphomet itself is contract made visible. The gesture solve et coagulatisolve and binds his contract between opposites. The torch between horns is pact of illumination. To bear light, you must also endure fire. The breasts and phallus, the serpent and wings, the goat head and angelic formal are clauses in covenant of paradox. To behold the image is to be confronted with offer. Will you sign? Will you embrace wholeness? Or will you flee into safety of binaries? Baphomet asks nothing more, but nothing less. Blood, as explored earlier, is currency of contracts. Pacts with Baphomet are no different. Not literal chalices, but willingness to bleed illusions, to suffer exile, to endure shame. To sign covenant of paradox is to pay with reputation, to carry stigma of devil worshipper, to accept suspicion of society. This is why image is so feared. To embrace it is to enter pact that empire cannot allow, for it strips authority of categories. Contract with Baphomet is rebellion against empire's contract of silence. Even modern invocations of Baphomet are bound by contracts, explicit or implicit. The satanic temples, statues of Baphomet placed as protests in front of courthouses, function as legal contracts in themselves. If one religion is allowed symbol, so must others. The goat-headed idol becomes clause in constitutional covenant, paradox embodied in law. Critics rage, believers defend, but pact is signed. Baphomet forces confrontation with principle of equality, contract of freedom written in stone. Here, ancient archetype becomes clause in modern legal battle, continuing its tradition as figure of contracts. Psychologically, pact with Baphomet is inner contract. To integrate shadow, to embrace contradictions, is agreement you make with self. Gungian analysis sees wholeness as a result of pact between conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, instinct and spirit. Baphomet embodies this archetypal contract, presenting image of unity and asking, will you sign within? This is forbidden contract, for it demands what religion and society forbid, acceptance of both light and shadow. Many flee, calling it devil. Do sign, finding wholeness in paradox. Philosophically, every society lives by contracts. Church enforces covenant of obedience. Follow authority, reject heresy. Empire enforces pact of loyalty. Bleed for nation, silence dissent. Baphomet offers alternative covenant, embrace paradox, question binaries, seek knowledge. Each contract exacts price. The forbidden truth is that you are always signing. Every act is covenant with some power, whether empire, church, or paradox. To choose Baphomet is not to escape contracts, but to invert them, to accept binding with shadow rather than denial of it. Imagine ritual circle. A seeker stands before a statue of goat-headed angel, torch ablaze. The figure does not move, does not speak. Yet in silence, offer is clear. Will you dissolve and recombine? Will you bleed illusions to awaken? Will you sign contract of paradox? No parchment is needed, no ink required. The signing is internal, written in choices, carved in courage. Once signed, you cannot unsign. The covenant of paradox is irreversible, for once you glimpse unity, binaries dissolve forever. The forbidden truth of Part 5 is this: pacts and contracts define every myth of Baphomet. Some were forged in lies, condemning Templars. Others are symbolic, inviting seekers. All share same structure: exchange, cost, binding. To demonize Baphomet is to brand its contract as damnation. To embrace it is to see that every life is already covenant, every choice already pact. The only question is with whom you sign. Will you bind yourself to Empire's silence, or to paradox that terrifies? At the heart of Baphomet lies an unsettling revelation. Morality itself is inverted. What Empire brands as blasphemy becomes scripture for the awakened. What church paints as obscenity becomes symbol of wholeness. What society fears as monstrous as mirror of its own repression. To confront Baphomet is to step into a chamber where the walls of good and evil dissolve, where the moral code we inherited is turned upside down and revealed for what it is, a system of control, not a law of nature. The architecture of orthodoxy depends on binaries. Male and female, light and dark, angel and demon, sacred and profane. These divisions sustain order, dictating who may speak, who must obey, what is holy, what is condemned. But Baphomet resists all binaries. It's his horned goat, yet winged angel, bearing breasts, yet phallic serpent, seated in throne, yet exiled to wilderness. It embodies paradox, and in so doing, reveals that binaries are masks. Empire calls this monstrosity, but in inverted code, monstrosity is wholeness, paradox is truth. Consider the breasts of Baphomet. In Empire's morality, they are obscene, evidence of corruption. Female breasts upon male body violate order, confuse categories. Yet, in inverted code, they are a symbol of completeness, masculine and feminine united, wholeness beyond division. To moralists, they are sin. To mystics, they are salvation. The inversion is stark. Impurity becomes perfection. Obscenity becomes wisdom. Or take the serpent entwined at the belly. For church, serpent is Satan, tempter of Eden, corrupter of innocence. To place serpent upon holy image is blasphemy. Yet in inverted code, serpent is knowledge, healing, life force. It is symbol of Gnosis rising through body, energy coiled in flesh. Empire brands it curse. Baphomet reveals it as gift. The inversion unmasks morality. What was forbidden because it liberates is labeled evil. The goat's head itself is inversion. In Levitical law, goat is scapegoat, bearer of sin driven into wilderness. In Christian demonology, goat becomes devil. But Baphomet enthrones goat as wisdom. Its eyes burn not with malice but with endurance. Goat is not outcast but sovereign. Here, inversion is radical. The animal exiled becomes an archetype of power. Sin-bearer becomes a symbol of truth. The moral code collapses in face of inversion. Even the torch between horns subverts Empire's morality. Fire, in Christian imagination, is hell, punishment, damnation. Yet in Baphomet, it becomes illumination. Crown of consciousness. Hellfire becomes enlightenment. Punishment becomes wisdom. This is inversion's ultimate revelation. What Empire calls damnation is often liberation. To embrace torch is to endure a stigma of hell in order to find Gnosis of light. But the inverted moral code is not only symbolic, it is historical. When the Templars were accused of worshipping Baphomet, they were condemned as heretics, traitors, blasphemers. In Empire's code, they were evil. Yet in inverted view, they were victims of power, scapegoats sacrificed for politics. Their heresy was fiction, their condemnation, injustice. The inversion reveals truth. Those branded heretics often embody courage. Those burned at stake often carry hidden wisdom. Empire calls them damned. History remembers them as martyrs of truth. This pattern repeats endlessly. Which is accused of kissing goat's rump were condemned as evil. Inverted code reveals their persecution as patriarchal fear of women's knowledge, herbal healing, independence. Heresy trials were said to protect purity. In truth, they enforced silence. Empire called it holiness. Inverted code calls it violence. The inversion exposes moral code as mask for power. Philosophically, this is a Gnostic pattern. Demiurge enforces false morality, demanding obedience, condemning knowledge. Salvation lies in rejecting false good, embracing forbidden Gnosis. Baphomet encodes this inversion in its very form. It is blasphemy to Empire, wholeness to mystic, sin to priest, revelation to seeker. The inverted moral code teaches that categories are tools of control, not reflections of reality. To awaken is to see through them. Psychologically, this inversion liberates shadow. In conventional morality, instincts, desires, contradictions are sins to be repressed. Baphomet integrates them. It says, "You are both light and dark, masculine and feminine, instinct and spirit. To repress is to fragment. To integrate is to heal." Inverted code redefines sin as denial of wholeness and virtue as embrace of paradox. What empire calls wickedness, desire, instinct, curiosity becomes sacred. What empire calls virtue obedience, silence, purity becomes sin, for it denies truth of being. The cost of inversion is stigma. To embrace Baphomet is to accept label of blasphemer, sinner, devil worshipper. Empire ensures that inversion carries punishment. Yet therein lies its paradoxical strength. The stigma itself becomes rite of passage. To bear name of heretic is to stand where truth hides. Inverted morality sanctifies condemnation, revealing that to be cursed by empire is to be blessed by Gnosis. Imagine gazing upon Baphomet's form. Goat head glares, torch blazes, serpent coils. A preacher cries devil, a priest warns damnation. Society recoils in fear, yet in silence you perceive another truth. The breasts speak of union, serpent whispers of knowledge, torch burns with illumination. You feel fear collapse into awe, condemnation invert into revelation. In that moment, you awaken to inverted moral code. The devil they taught you to fear is scripture of balance. The sin they warned against is path of wholeness. The forbidden truth of part 6 is this: morality as preached by empire is inverted. What it calls evil often liberates. What it calls holy often enslaves. Baphomet embodies this inversion, carrying within its monstrous form the revelation that categories themselves are illusions. Good and evil are masks. Wholeness is beyond them. To awaken is to see that the true blasphemy is not embracing paradox, but denying it. To speak of Baphomet is to speak of ritual, for ritual is the stage on which its meaning has been performed, distorted, condemned, and reclaimed. Rituals are not confined to dark chambers or candlelit altars. They are the unconscious performances repeated across history, binding societies together, reinforcing hierarchies, or whispering forbidden truths. In the case of Baphomet, ritual has always been everywhere. In inquisitorial trials, in whispered Sabbaths, in esoteric rites of seekers, in modern protests, where its statue stands defiantly before courthouses. The earliest rituals of Baphomet were rituals of accusation. The trials of the Knights Templar unfolded like liturgy. Accusers asked scripted questions. Tortured confessions were repeated like prayers, sentences proclaimed with solemn rhythm. The act of branding the Templars heretics was itself ritual, the church reenacting its authority. The crown displaying its power, the crowd witnessing sacrifice. No idol was found, yet the ritual of condemnation created its reality. To burn men alive, to hear their screams rise like incense, was to consecrate empire's order. Here, Baphomet became not figure of worship, but scapegoat in ritual drama of power. Later centuries added other performances. Trials across Europe describe Sabbaths where women danced around goat-headed idols, kissed them, drank blood, inverted crosses. These were not literal accounts, but ritual scripts imposed by inquisitors. Every trial followed same choreography: accusation, confession, execution. Each death-fed ritual of fear, teaching the masses that Baphomet was demon lurking in shadows. In these ceremonies of terror, the figure became living myth, sustained not by worshippers, but by persecutors. Yet even in suppression, counter-rituals emerged. Esoteric circles adopted Baphomet as symbol of hidden knowledge, performing rites of meditation, invocation, visualization. For them, the goat-headed figure was not devil but guide. Rituals of alchemy invoked solve, et coagula dissolve, and recombine, mirroring Baphomet's gestures. Practitioners traced pentagrams, lit candles, whispered incantations, using image as mirror for inner transformation. These rites inverted empire's morality. What was condemned as blasphemy became ceremony of balance, healing, Gnosis. Rituals of Baphomet also seep into art and culture. Eliphas Levi's engraving itself is ritual in ink, consecrating paradox into image. Every time it is reproduced, gazed upon, debated, a ritual occurs, the ritual of confrontation with paradox. To wear Baphomet's tattoo is ritual of defiance, a permanent consecration of body with symbol of forbidden truth. To place statue of Baphomet before courthouse is ritual of protest, forcing society to confront paradox of religious freedom. These acts are not accidents. They are modern liturgies, reenactments of a Joel drama where Baphomet embodies forbidden balance. The most striking ritual of Baphomet is its silence. Despite centuries of accusations, no ancient cult of Baphomet has been found. No liturgy, no hymns, no scriptures exist. Its worship was largely invention of persecutors, yet the repetition of accusations, the endless rehearsals of fear, became ritual strong enough to carve reality. Baphomet was created through ritual, not as demon from abyss, but as echo of collective fear and fascination. This is ritual everywhere. Repetition makes myth, performance conjures presence. Modern rituals surrounding Baphomet reveal its paradoxical role. In satanic temple ceremonies, the statue serves as altar for freedom, rebellion, equality. In Christian sermons, denunciations of Baphomet continue, preachers repeating accusations centuries old. In internet forums, memes and debates circulate image endlessly, transforming it into digital ritual. Every share, every comment, every accusation is ritual act feeding archetype. Baphomet thrives in this repetition, sustained not only by devotees but by enemies. Ritual is everywhere, sustaining paradox, whether in devotion or condemnation. Philosophically, ritual is engine of reality. Humans repeat gestures, stories, symbols, and through repetition, they bind meaning. Baphomet exemplifies this. The torch between horns is symbol, but when countless seekers meditate upon it, it becomes a ritual of illumination. The goat's head is image, but when society recoils at it, that recoil is ritual of fear. Ritual does not need temple. It only needs repetition. Every gasp of horror, every sermon against it, every invocation for it all, are rituals feeding same archetype. Psychologically, ritual integrates shadow. To confront Baphomet in ritual is to rehearse paradox, to practice integration. Lighting candle before its image, tracing pentagram, whispering invocation. These are not mere theatrics, but rehearsals of wholeness. Ritual externalizes inner work. The seeker repeats gestures until paradox sinks into flesh. Ritual everywhere. Churches call it blasphemy, but seekers call it awakening. The same act, inverted code, different meaning. Imagine cathedral of history. At one altar, inquisitors perform ritual of condemnation, condemning heretics to fire. At another, witches are said to dance around goat-headed idol. At another, occultist sketches figure with torch of illumination. At another, protesters unveil statue before courthouse. Different ages, different contexts, but same liturgy. Repetition of paradox. Ritual of confrontation with a symbol that refuses to die. Baphomet endures because ritual is everywhere, sustaining it through fear and fascination alike. The forbidden truth of Part 7 is this. Baphomet is not only symbol but ritual, sustained by centuries of repetition. Whether in trials, sermons, tattoos, or protests, its figure returns, invoked in endless ceremonies. To believe or condemn, to worship or denounce both, are rituals feeding same archetype. Baphomet thrives because ritual is everywhere, and in every ritual it whispers paradox. The demon you fear is balance you need. Awakening in the presence of Baphomet is not sudden revelation of light, but a slow and shattering realization. The monster you were taught to fear is the mirror of your own contradictions. It is not salvation in the Christian sense, nor liberation in political sense, but lucidity, the clarity that comes when masks of morality fall away and you stand before paradox unshielded. To awaken, here is to see that wholeness lies not in purity, but in union, not in division, but in reconciliation of opposites. The The first stirrings of awakening come when you recognize the architecture of distortion. Centuries of sermons, trials, effigies told you Baphomet was devil incarnate. The goat's horns were evil, the torch was hellfire, the serpent was temptation, the breasts were obscenity. But as you gaze deeper, the narrative fractures. You realize horns symbolize vitality, torch illumination, serpent wisdom, breasts wholeness. Awakening begins when you see inversion. What empire called evil was wisdom all along. The figure does not change. Your sight does. Then comes confrontation with self. Baphomet does not only unite external opposites, male and female, light and dark, angel and beast, it also unites the opposites within you. All the instincts you repress, desires you condemn, shadows you exile are reflected in goat's eyes. You see that you are not purely virtuous, nor purely sinful, but both entwined. Awakening is acceptance. You are paradox. To deny this is to fragment. To embrace it is to heal. The image becomes mirror, demanding you sign covenant of wholeness with yourself. This awakening destabilizes. The categories that ordered your life dissolve. Good and evil blur, sacred and profane collapse. You stand in space without boundaries, and fear rises. But paradox whispers, fear is sign that you are near truth. Empire taught you safety in binaries. Awakening demands courage in paradox. To embrace Baphomet is to accept exile from certainty, to live in wilderness of integration. It is painful, yet it is real. Psychologically, awakening is individuation. Jung described path of wholeness as integration of shadow, union of anima and animus.
Baphomet
Embodies this archetype, breasts and phallus, wings and hooves, torch and darkness. The seeker who confronts Baphomet awakens to truth that self is not one but many. That integration requires embracing contradictions. The demon of balance becomes therapist of soul, guiding you to reconciliation, empire forbids. Awakening is realization that the devil is healer, the monster is teacher, the forbidden figure is mirror of healing. Spiritually awakening reframes salvation. No longer is it obedience to external law or escape from flesh. Instead, it is gnosis knowledge that liberates through paradox. The torch between horns becomes your crown of fire, serpent, your rising energy. Breasts your reconciliation, wings your transcendence grounded in hooves. To awaken is to see these not as obscene, but as scripture. Baphomet is not devil barring heaven, but angel revealing that heaven and hell are inside you, reconciled through wholeness. Philosophically, awakening dismantles empire's code. You see that morality enforced by power is architecture of control, not eternal truth. To call Baphomet devil is strategy, not fact. Awakening is recognition that good and evil are categories wielded by rulers. That forbidden knowledge is dangerous not because it is false, but because it dissolves control. You awaken to freedom, but it is dangerous freedom. No longer can you hide behind dogma. You must write your own law. Awakening is terrifying because it places responsibility back into your hands. Ritually awakening transforms repetition. Before, sermons condemning Baphomet, memes mocking it, tattoos invoking it all were external performances. Once you awaken, they become sacraments of paradox. You see that ritual everywhere sustains archetype not as enemy but as teacher. Every denunciation becomes confession of fear. Every invocation becomes affirmation of wholeness. The world itself becomes temple of paradox, Baphomet enthroned in shadows of society, teaching through fear, whispering through condemnation. Imagine standing before a statue of Baphomet, torch blazing, children carved at its side. Protesters scream devil, seekers bow in reverence, stand silent, and in silence comes awakening. Both are rituals, both feed archetype. The symbol does not belong to one side or another. It's paradox, feared and adored, cursed and praised, devil and guide. Awakening is understanding that you are not spectator, but participant. Your gaze itself feeds ritual, your thought signs contract. You cannot remain neutral. To awaken is to choose paradox. The cost of awakening is exile. Society brands you blasphemer, heretic, devil worshipper. Family may fear you, community may reject you. But Baphomet's torch teaches, stigma itself is rite of passage. To be condemned by empire is to be sanctified by paradox. Awakening is lonely, yet it is sacred. For in loneliness, you find wholeness. In exile, you find integration. In condemnation, you find truth. The forbidden truth of Part 8 is this: awakening to Baphomet is awakening to yourself. It is seeing that you are a paradox, that wholeness lies not in purity but in union of opposites. It is realizing that categories are masks, morality, a construct, fear a ritual. To awaken is to accept cost, to sign contract, to bleed illusions, to bear stigma, to stand in wilderness of paradox with torch of Gnosis burning between your horns. Once awakened, you cannot return to binaries. The world is forever changed. Monstrous becomes holy, forbidden becomes true, devil becomes balance. And you were paradox all along. The torch still burns, the goat still gazes, and the paradox remains. Baphomet is not the devil they taught you to fear, but the mirror of your hidden wholeness. Do you dare to embrace it? Comment your thoughts, subscribe, and join us for the next Forbidden Descent.